Hey now, how is everybody doing? Welcome to Red Alert Diaries Live with Tanya E. Hood. I am hoping that you had the opportunity to listen to this morning's episode because I wanted to make certain that I said thank you. Thank you to the unsung heroes. Thank you for those fathers that stand in the gap. Thank you for those that often don't feel like they're celebrated. I want you to know that you are seen, you are appreciated, and I'm hoping that somebody gave you some of that love and some of that joy over this past weekend. If you listen to this morning's episode, then I shared a few ways that you can start capturing some of the thoughts about what you're dealing with. Create your own small microcosm moments of celebration. But if you didn't listen to this episode, so I wanted to share. This morning I shared about 6 different emotional elements that we walk through. We have a couple of different nuances that they're discussed, but overall, we have 6 different nuances that we typically walk through. And one of the pieces that I typically find that men struggle with a lot is dealing with the one called anger. And that anger is burst out because there's sub elements that they often don't get the chance to express. You see, this weekend celebrating the unsung heroes in our lives, those that stand in the gap on a regular basis, sometimes for children that are not their own. I am grateful that there are men that will do that because as a daddyless daughter, I needed the men in my community to stand in the gap. And so, being a village baby, I had the chance to have my village surround me. I had the elder men in my church that gave me insight about life as I got older, watched over me as time went on. I had those that were on my neighborhood block that would make certain that they direct me, hey, you know, your grandmother doesn't want you on this side or whatever. So that nudging of reinforcement of elements that I was being taught, the men in my community did that. You see, being in a community where everybody stands in the gap, and especially for those that don't have the father figures. When a man stands in, gives that insight to support the journey of those children that are not their own, it does help. And it's a great deal of help because I know for certain that I appreciated it. I have uncles to this day, no blood runs through our veins, but the relational elements that I have as familiarity, oh, that's deep. That impact is because they raised me, child that was not theirs, but they stood in the gap. So to my uncles, I say thank you. To my grandparents, I say thank you. And I'm hoping that they all feel the love and appreciation because as we grow up and move on, sometimes when you have elements like that, the village baby moments, generations to come often get a little confused when society says that you should be a little more reserved about how you dictate who's parent, father, and mother. We are in an environment where we need to stop holding on to the old thought processes of the nuclear family just being a father and just being a mother that give birth to just their children. We're in a society where we need to have everybody stand in the gap. And for the fathers to stand in, you show what it is like for a child to want to say, hey, I have an everyday superhero as they're watching all the stuff on TV, but they see you get up and go to work. It may look mundane, it may look like it's not all that grand, but here's the thing I need you to know. The stability that you are showing by consistently being present. Oh, that's a superhero move right there. A lot of people may not feel like it, and sometimes children don't really understand it. But when you are consistent, that consistency lays a foundation that creates a legacy that they will soon discover as they get older that is necessary. And maybe one day, them seeing you sacrifice yourself to love them, children that may not be your own. They'll get the opportunity to love on somebody else that's different than them, that doesn't look like them, that doesn't come from the same environment as them. That one little element of you just being a father carries a magnitude greater than you can ever imagine. So, my thank you this morning was to let you know that I see you, that you are appreciated. When you show others what it means by doing the humdrum day to day stuff, The fathers that often that I have encountered the most that are no longer with their children like they desire because the relationship that you are in no longer exists, either because of separation or divorce. But either way, you're not there. And as a mother that had to walk through the visionary thoughts of how do I get my children to still be connected, even though I'm not connected. Here's the thing I would appreciate as a divorced mother when I was walking through that element of my journey. Please find a way, if you can, to connect so your children don't have to keep going through all the various consternations of the back and forth. If you have a way that you're going to be present with one another and you decide to separate your households, one weekend the child is there, another weekend that child is there, find a way of making that co-parenting piece a little easier on them because they're already walking through the emotional warfare of the separation of your households. And when fathers often are put in a position where they think that because I'm no longer in the home, I no longer have a voice, I no longer have a presence. If you are a woman in a divorce situation or separated and a father wants to be present, don't fight them on that. Help them build a new dynamic for your family. The relationship breakdown was with you. The relationship breakdown is not often with your children. Now, I want to preface this because I've also walked through the experience that other parent may not be in a position that is suitable for your children. Put the boundaries that are necessary in place. I'm speaking to the fathers that have to raise their children because the mother is not present. I'm speaking to the mothers that may have to raise their children because the father is not present. Whatever that is, make certain that your babies are whole, that your babies are safe. Lay the boundaries that are needed. So, what I often teach, share, and show when you find yourself, unfortunately, in this position, assess. Do the first thing of assessing the situation. And when you take the time to assess, you let the feelings that you have sort of abate a little bit. And you let some logic stand in a place. You're pulling up a different strength because you contain all the various strengths in your soul. But we have a tendency to just lean to one or another. If you find yourself a person that is always supportive, always giving, always loving, and you find yourself on the back end of a divorce trying to figure out what it is that you can still do and how much you still have to give when you gave all that you tried in that relationship, you've gone through the moment. I don't want to do this anymore. So when the other parent, even though they may have been an okay parent, you decide if we're done, because I gave so much, I'm done. And you figure out what you're going to do. And you use the court system as a weapon. Stop doing that. Don't use the court system as a weapon. Love on your babies. Create the assessment. Because when you sit down, you take some of that emotion out, some of that hurt out. And if you haven't had the chance to get that undergirding, the anger sometimes that we feel. For women, that anger comes out in lashing moments that get spewed into a man's heart. And then the anger that he feels because he does not want to be physical with you or very combative because society looks at a man different when he shows his anger in a combative method. So sometimes that anger for a man is smothered down inside and it gets boiled in the recesses of their soul and it becomes depression. So that man gives up. That man no longer fights, or he'll become controversial in every other area of his world, and that is not supportive. This first step, assessing the situation, takes out a lot of the emotional chaos that you have to deal with. The second thing that you can do, and I shared some other things in this morning's episode, so go back and listen to those other things. But for today, the extended conversation, the second thing that you can do is write it out. Write out a strategy plan. It's like creating a survey of what's going on, which is what your assessment did, and then putting together a scoping mechanism of how do I move through the next steps. The assessment lets you see But the next step of creating that plan, the scoping survey, however you want to call it, that element right there is where you start looking out for yourself. So guard your heart. Because when you guard your heart, you also make certain that you write a plan in place that will support you and support those around you. So the boundaries that are in place, supportive, because you've assessed it. The extra emotion is no longer in it. The third thing you need to do is to communicate effectively. But you may need a community to support you in a journey. I shared pieces about that in this morning's episode. So go back and listen if you haven't listened to that part. Because when you have a community of individuals that understand your journey, they can let you know when they see what plan you're putting in place to survey what's happening in your world. How did you assess and did you have enough assessment that took out enough of the emotion so that the plan is not chaotic and can be conveyed effectively? Because you may need a member of your community to draw in the other individual to help you on the journey. But sometimes, backing it up, you have to do one of the things I shared in this morning's episode. Write down how you're feeling about the situation. If you feel upset, write that down. What triggered you to be upset so that you know. If you are sad and you're not quite sure, assess what that means and write it down because you have to get mindful of how you're feeling these different emotional elements so that when you do write your plan, you can determine whether that assessment that you gave was an assessment that still contains some emotions because you know what they are, that you wrote out a plan that will support you, whatever your scoping survey was for that situation, doing a complete view of what happened, and then have your community support you in the journey. But you'll know what your triggers are along the way. So when they ask you, well, how did you feel about this? How did you feel about that? You would have already done the assessment about how you feel. And that will give you an opportunity to start putting together some measures. But what you may need to do for some men that are always on the grind, always moving, trying to make certain things are together because you're working sometimes twice as hard because if you got stuck in the system, because somebody used it as a weapon and you're paying child support in addition to still giving things to the other parent because they asked for it and you still want to make certain your children have what they need. So you got like a double-edged sword hitting you. So you're working 2 or 3 jobs, trying to make it work, trying to keep things going, trying to put some things in place. I have walked through the element of working 2 or 3 jobs, trying to keep the financial position whole. I've also, unfortunately, had to use the court system to support me. Tried my best not to make certain it was used as a weapon, but it is an unfair place. So if you can figure out an amicable way to stay out of that environment so that men aren't unfairly put in a position, those that are trying. Because some, yeah, you do need the court system to structure the way that it is structured. But there are some men that are standing on post to be fathers, amazing fathers, because they're standing in the gap for their children and someone else's. Don't make that hard for them. But men know how you're feeling. Because when you are aware of how you feel, you can express that to a community that can support you. You can get the elements that are needed moving in the journey. And if all of this seems like, okay, I've tried and I'm not sure what else to do, feel free to go to my website, tanyaehood.com. There you can click the Contact Me tab. I have a schedule that's in place. We can set up a quick 30-minute assessment so that you can do that first part, assess. I'll take the time with you to develop a scoping survey to give you the plan that you need to move forward to put boundaries in place that can protect your heart and give you the opportunity to still be celebrated. Because in this moment, we're pausing and I'm hoping that you felt appreciated over the weekend. And if you have not, do this thing that I typically do. My birthday month, I celebrate the whole month. So if you need to celebrate the whole month, do so. One of the techniques I shared was creating a gratitude journal, writing out what you're grateful for. And if you don't remember what that is today or this moment, or you may not have had your children with you over this weekend and didn't work out like you planned, it's okay. Write it down and create some moments in time along the rest of the month. And for those of you that have men that are standing in the gap, find other ways of celebrating them. My husband, Eric, celebrates the entire month for his birthday, and I do my best to ensure that there are touch points along the way throughout the entire year. It's not just Father's Day that's a celebration. Celebrate your man the entire year. Pick one or two moments as they take on the world, being the warriors that they are, standing in the gap like they do. We see you, those that are functioning in that capacity. We appreciate you and thank you. In the meantime, this is Tanya E. Hood, walking in my purpose, and I want you to do the same. Take care, and thank you once again.